All right, to everybody who has just joined, you can hear a little background there, and it's just my way of setting up the queue for the next show. So I greatly appreciate you listening and joining us here in webinar as we're doing this through social media. And I'll shut up until he starts talking. Yeah, all that stuff's true. All that's true. We got our own bureau. Oh yeah. So I wonder how everybody's doing today. We are. We're having a pretty good day here, everything considered. And of course, we're on the air, so that also makes this a little bit of fun. Let's get off the air right now. Let's go, Billy. Come on, get that done. Get that done. Get that done. Get it done. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. All right. All I need to do is queue up here, and then we will start. Here we go. All right. I appreciate everybody coming on, whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm also doing this on YouTube, but we haven't been advertising that yet. And this is a soft launch of a new service that we're going to be putting together. Well, not going to be putting together. It's a service that we're putting together right now as we prepare for next season, next April, which is our third year on the air. And we've got some interesting things that we want to do with that period of time. So with that, what are we doing today? And this is we're not on the air yet over the radio network. We're only on the air here on social media platforms. And that is what we're going to cover is we're going to be talking about this whole idea about becoming the lowest cost producer. And I have, if you're on LinkedIn or on Facebook, or for that matter, oh no, I couldn't do this with Twitter. Is that you can see that there is a link that'll take you to the shows or pages that we're going to be talking about or working from here today. And so the whole thing is that let's put this together, and I'll have to be somewhat repetitive when we come on the air in about 1 minute, and that is we found that there's three things in a recession or an economic contraction. There's three things that if you do it, you're going to get through it. Number one, you'll survive it. Number two, you actually may come out of it a little bit stronger than when you went in. And so you start by knowing your numbers, financials, which was what we do on Mondays, did yesterday. Didn't do a webinar, we just did a show. And then based upon that, you need to work on both sides of the ledger. So today we're working on the denominator. We're working on costs. We're working on the bottom of the equation on how do you become the lowest cost producer. And then tomorrow we'll be working on the numerator, which is revenue. So next. All right, we're in. You are listening to IBGR, the International Business Radio Network. IBGR, Business Growth Radio. It's only been 3 years since we've been doing that. Going kind of, but anyway, yeah, that's just how life goes. You're doing a managing partner, co-founder here, as well as, and this is we're doing a series as I was saying to my audience on LinkedIn and Facebook before we started the audio show, is that over the last, I don't want to go 4 decades of being a bit the best way of saying it, is that I've been through 5 economic downturns. And what we did is we produced what's the guide? If we're going to get through this, how would you get through it? And so that's what we've been working on. And we came up with there are basically 3 tracks that you have to do. On Monday, on our finance day, we talk about track one. And track one is nothing more than owning your numbers. All right. You know what your numbers are. Then you work on the equation. Tuesday, we're talking about it as cost producer. I've got a particular emphasis on cost value there. Well, we're working on the denominator of the fraction. The more that I can reduce the cost, and then on Wednesday, tomorrow, of course, our webinar won't be till next week because we alternate every week, but our show will be there. How do I increase the revenue? So if I increase the revenue on the top line, decrease the cost on the bottom line in my fraction, what's going to happen is I'm going to have better economic performance. So today we're talking about better economic performance from a cost perspective, and then the whole thing, your network. What you need to do is go to the website. When you get to the website, that's ibgr.network, our name, our URL, and our broadcast frequency. When you get there, go all the way over to on the resource bar, on the navigation bar, go all the way to the right to resources, mouse over, you'll see show notes and click it. Now, it's got to be one more step, unfortunately. Once you do that, you on the side see archives, and then you'll see categories. If you'll scroll down the page, go to season 12 operations, which is where we are right now. And if you pop that open, then that'll take you to the page that we're going to be working from. Now I've got 4 shows up here, and what I'm going to do is going to take each one of these by segment, our 12 and a half minute segments we got together. And that if you got any questions or comments, now if you're listening to this on the radio network, and in a minute here I'm about to open up season 12 episodes 5 through 9. Go ahead and put a comment in there. I'll see it. Or you can go to LinkedIn, which is William Eastman. It is my LinkedIn page. Or you can go to Facebook, and on Facebook, it is our company page, IBGR Network. And either way, you can put in your comments there, and I can get those done. All right. So you got it. You should be there. Let's get rolling. And I think the thing I got to do here is I got to check to see if I got any comments. No comments to speak of yet. So if you go down the list and you go down to the very bottom, S12, E5 through 9. What is that hieroglyphics? S12 represents season 12. E5 through E9 represents episodes 5 through 9. All right. These are podcasts. All these are linked to their podcast. And here, what we did is we talked about the lowest cost producer model. Now, if you want to pop that and click it, or I'll talk you through it. And what you have here, boom, boom, whenever it does, it has basically the concept about lowest cost producer. And what I did is I gave you a number of different terms and things to consider. But basically, lowest cost producer says that if I want to be either competitive or I want to be the best in my market, there's a couple places that I can work on. But if I work on the cost side of the equation, then how do I do that? And the answer is, how do I take as much steps and useless activity out of the processes that we use? And you basically start with your processes that are directly related to what you produce for a customer. All right, so you start there and you work backwards, because you got a lot of hidden things that you do inside the business that you have to do, like accounting, finance, maybe customer service, all the things that you have to do that are not directly related to the thing that you sell. Well, those are just as important, but they're secondary right now to, if you've got 3 products or 3 services that you sell, you're going to go after that first and get that under control. Now, if you're a very, very small business, more than likely you've been doing this as you've been doing it. So we start from the standpoint of, let's build it the first time. And it's nothing more than what we call value mapping. So first, let's do the map. And you say, okay, let's take this from beginning to end and do a pictorial of that. Here's what this whole thing looks like when we stretch it out. All right, now I got let's look at each one of those steps and let's examine that. Now, if you're by yourself, this gets a little bit more difficult because you're only talking to yourself. Here's where you would like a little collaboration. But if you've got other people in the organization, then what you're looking for here is to say, okay, let's take each one of these apart and say, all right, before we say, can we do this better? Is there a better methodology? Let's start by asking the value questions. And the value questions are threefold. Number one, if we were to itemize the bill and give it to the customer, would they pay for this step? That's number one. All right. Number two, and my light is not being happy with me. Number two in the process then is okay, if I get a no, in other words, the customer won't pay for it, I've got a candidate to get rid of it. If the answer is no, yeah, the customer will pay for it, then we're done. You move on. But if you go, no, I don't think I could charge the customer for this particular step, then the second question is, and again, I'm trying to determine value, is do we have to do this for some technical engineering? In other words, in order to build the product or service, that step is essential. If the answer is yes, you keep it and you move on to the next step. If, on the other hand, you got to know in the first two, you come to the third question, and that is, are we doing this because of some sort of government regulation? It's regulatory. It is a requirement that's external to us. Now, if you get a no on all three, ditch it. Just get rid of it. And so, what you'll be able to do on that first pass is take out 10 or 15% of the things that you're doing because there is no value being provided to the customer, to your company, and you are not being required to do it by law or by regulation. Get rid of it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to be taking a look at the steps that are remaining, going, okay, now, can we do these better? Can this be done better? And the whole goal there is to reduce this process down to where you've taken out steps. If you take out steps, think about what happens. You take out time. And when you take out steps, the other thing that happens is that you take out the opportunity for error or mistakes. Companies that use this approach for lowest common denominator, for to become the lowest cost producer, what you find is that if it's the first time you've done this, there is no reason why 10 to 15% cost reduction immediately. All right. I mean, it is gold on the ground. It's low hanging fruit. I mean, everybody's heard the analogies. It's basically where to go in your initial stages. And once I do that, now what I have is a much more abbreviated process. Now, what we're also going to look at is every step along the way, because you can see that though we've talked about all those different things that you could do, what you're basically trying to do is come up with processes that at least make you equal to what you would consider the industry average. Your long term goal, if it's the first time you've done it, you're not going to build world class processes. Okay. Let's just be realistic with each other. But long term, if this is your third or fourth attempt, then what you ought to be considering is how do we become the world or industry leader in this particular area? All right. And that is where I would take this whole thing, where I would take it. And where we have done this in the past is to take it to that level to where, okay, we're there. We've got a process that allows us to build it better, faster, for less. And that's the whole thing about the LCP, lowest cost producer process. All right. I first tripped across this. I've been doing things like this for a number of years, but I first tripped across this in the early 1990s when I was doing lean implementation work for General Motors / Delphi. And we combined a couple of different techniques together. And I can tell you that this works wherever we've done it. We've done it with startups. We've done it with mid-sized companies. We've done it in a large corporation that's unionized, UAW, United Auto Workers, who really scrutinize anything management wants to do about a work process gets closely scrutinized. And why is that? Well, because what gets negotiated, okay, in a contract is not entirely, but a lot of that is work rules. And so the UAW is basically going, here's a contract, you can't violate the contract. And yet when we did this process, they didn't have a problem with it because in there was nothing to intend to violate the process. And if they had to negotiate a little piece of this out, they were quite willing to do that, obviously if it was to their advantage. But the deal is this particular process works. And if you're a small business and this is the first time, this is a great place to start. It absolutely, in my mind, is a wonderful place to start. Okay, so let me see where we are clockwise. I'm going to check out my questions. And it'll have to Facebook or LinkedIn. gone over there because I can take the questions immediately. If you're going to stick on radio and just use the internet, then go ahead and put any comments that you may have or questions on the comments section here. And I am basically talking about do 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 do. I'm talking about episodes or podcasts 5 through 9, and this is the overall LCP model. Now, when we come back from the break, what are we going to be doing next? Well, we're going to take the next step here, and we're going to be taking episode podcast 17 through 20 on increasing supplier value. Because now that we've looked at the entire process, now what our goal is now begin to look at each one of those pieces in greater detail. Doing the value mapping was a macro approach. Now we're going to do is take a micro approach to look at facet. Okay, so I think you're listening, and if you can hop on here on social media, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn, that would be killer. Facebook is IBGR Network. Our name on LinkedIn right now, I'm doing this as a test on my personal site. And I think with that, I best get out. So don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to be talking about looking at suppliers. Thanks for listening. All right. So everybody that is doing this on social media, I am now off the air. And so let's check to see what we got. We're going to have to hang in here for a couple minutes. All right. So, yeah, I think hopefully you're getting the gist of what we're doing here is that look at your financial performance like a fraction, like a math problem that's a fraction. I know some people like, oh, no, fractions. I hate that. I understand that. But your financial performance, F equals what? R over C, revenue over cost. So when anybody is trying to improve a business, and I did a number of turnarounds, and this is the formula would work, is that you would look for the leverage point. What's the one thing on the cost side that we could do that have the greatest impact, and just do that one thing? And what's the biggest thing that we could do on the revenue side that would have the greatest impact like that? And you can begin to knock down both sides because if you reduce costs at the same time increase your revenue, then what have I done? I've considerably improved the performance of your business. Now, another way of looking at this is from the standpoint of cost and quality. If you're really concerned about building better products and delivering higher quality services, this is the same process that you would use to do that, because that will kind of guarantee to you that you're there. And so what I find is that as you reduce cost, if you do it from the right perspective, there is almost, it's not a guarantee, but in front of you is the ability to improve quality. Because if I take out steps along the way, fewer steps means fewer opportunities to make a mistake. And so if I look at it from that perspective, I can build a better product or service, and that I can do it at a lower cost. And if I do it at a lower cost, then where do I stand? Well, in an economic downturn, I'd be losing revenue. I'm going to put this on here for a second. All right, that tells me we're back. Well, I'll pick up this conversation when we get in. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm a host for today's show. We are in our second segment today. And what do I mean by second segment? This show is broken down into 4 pieces. Now, what we're doing is this is part of a webinar series we're doing, calling it the challenge, in that this gives you an opportunity to engage in a two-way conversation, not a one-way conversation with whoever's on. In this particular case, it's me. So you can argue or agree with me if you like. So here's what you got to do. There are 3 ways to play. One is go to the website, and if you're going to listen, just listen audio. Then go to ibgr.network. When you get there, navigation bar at the top of the page, resources, click show notes. You got, fortunately, but once you open that up, it just what are the shows in the queue? Scroll down through that, past archives into categories, and you'll see as you go down about 2/3 way down the page, you'll see season 12, S12, season 12, operations. Click it, and now you have all of the shows that I am talking about today. All right, so I'm going to go there. And so what we're talking about now is the second from the bottom. It says S12 for season 12, which is this one, episode or podcast 17 through 20. This is becoming the lowest cost producer. That is the theme of this track 2. And increasing supplier value added is where we're going. So pop open, or you can follow along with me. And what I'm interested about this is if you take a look at some of the numbers, reducing supplier costs from 9% to 4% could double your profits. In other words, there is a lot of money here that small improvements don't appear to be large gains on profitability, but they are. All right. 57% of customers or consumers believe the right suppliers give you a competitive advantage, especially if you have a high value supplier. So what we did is once we kind of drew this map of, and we got this model here where we got input, throughput, output. That's the way I want to look at any process. What comes in, what do we do with it, what goes out? So now that in the previous one, when we talked about the value chain, we talked about the whole thing. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to the beginning and saying, okay, let's take a look into funnel, because the higher the quality, the better the relationship is, the better the output's going to be. All right. So what we did is how to pick the right suppliers. Now, I would recommend to you is that there's a whole bunch of different thought on this. So you're not going to necessarily get somebody who's going to go automatically, this is it. It's typically fewer suppliers is better than more suppliers. Okay. Keep that as kind of a truth. However, you want to mix that with some small businesses and large businesses, and I'll tell you why in a minute here, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to analyze, if I'm going to look at the existing suppliers I have, I want to analyze the nature of the relationship that we have. In other words, how easy is it to reach out to them, get help, make a purchase, get it shipped, get it in, and then pay for it? In other words, what's the whole process that I have to work with the supplier? And so that how easy is this? How easy are they to use, or is there a lot of friction in the system? Now, what I want to do is, if an existing supplier, then it kind of gives me a roadmap to say, hey, this is what I want to do to improve my relationship. On the other hand, is that if I'm looking for a supplier, then this is going to be at the top of my list, or maybe number 2. One is they sell what I need, okay? But then number 2, if there are 10 possible suppliers and 6 sell what you need, all right, so what's the next part of the list? Now, a lot of people will go cost or price, all right? Price is important, but to me, it is not number 1 on the list, because if you only look at price and you're not looking at anything else that we're talking about here, is that more than likely those relationships wind up costing you more money and not less. Okay. So how easy is it in the buying process, or how much friction is there? Okay. If you take stuff from them, if they give you a product or service, can you immediately use it, or do you have to rework it or fix it or clean it or do something to it before you can use it? And I want to estimate what that is, because that adds to the cost. If I got friction in the process that adds 2 hours to labor to buy this, I want to put the price of that labor into the cost. Right? You'll see where I'm going with this. The same thing here, any rework. Okay. And then because I did those 2, is now I want to adjust the unit price, because it could be that because I've got to put 3 hours of labor in, and let's say I'm paying labor $20 an hour, that's $60, and I'm buying 10 units, $60 is $6 a unit. It could be, if I had that additional money added to the price, that these guys are more expensive than somebody who, say, is selling it for $6.50, right? And so what it gives you the ability to do is look at the true cost of the true cost of something. All right. And then the last one is different. And that has to do with their expertise. Do they have something to share? And this is where I go back and forth on. You need to have a couple of large organizations as suppliers, as well as having, many, I would say many smaller businesses. I think a mix is good, but with a large company, one of the things they have, that they have, is they have an R&D department, they have a marketing department, they have a sales department. These people are doing research. Now, why aren't you tapping into it? Now, you think about that and you may say, well, why would they give it to me? Well, if you sold more, does that improve the relationship you have with them or not? Well, of course it does. Okay, so now that gets me into another list here, and that is all right. Let's take a look at when I've done business with them. Is it good faith, or are they constantly trying to work me? Cell companies. Best example is that you have to leave them to get a better rate, rather than just coming in and say, "Hey, we got better rates today." And so, in that particular case, they knew that they could give you the better rate, but unless you threaten to leave, they don't give it to you. So is that really good faith negotiation? Also, is when we meet, do we really get down to the point where we understand each other's businesses? In other words, do they treat this as more than just a transaction, but they're looking long term, okay, at us as well, right? That's critical. And then the other thing I would say is that in the process of having these conversations with them, in other words, do they immediately want to take your order, or do what they want to know more about you? And then finally, you get a good handle on their willingness to invest in the relationship. Now, I'm not talking about them giving you money and investing in your company. I'm talking about their willingness to invest in the relationship. And this is going to become critical if, let's say, I need some market research, and it's going to cost them something to do it. Well, can I ask them to do it? All right. So now that is in some ways how they also should be looking at it. In other words, when you negotiate with them, are you just kicking tires? In other words, if they give you a good offer and then you go down the street for a penny less, um, that tells them that you're just a buyer on price, and that if you need a favor from them, they may think twice about that. And that you ask questions about their business, and do you get to understand them? And are you willing to invest in the relationship with them to the same level they're willing to invest in you? Um, Now, let's take that to the next level. And that is, do you get any bump from having their brand associated with you? In other words, if you put on your website sponsored by IBM, would that help you? And that because that is one of the ways that you ought to be looking at these relationships, because people are going, well, they do business with so and so. Well, they're looking at it the same way, going, are you a fly by night operation, or are you people actually serious? And that kind of leads me to the next one, and that is now let's talk about how we build revenue for both. That is really critical here. And if I've got to know them, then I can ask that question. Say, okay, how do we help you increase revenue or margins? Now, a lot of what they tell me, I probably can't do, or it's not helpful to me. But it's helpful to know it because I can look for those opportunities. But let's say they talk about something I can do. All right, and that's where I'm going to go after it. And then the last thing around that is, try to keep your number of suppliers to as few as possible, but you don't want to buy from one person. It's kind of like if you've got one account, you got one account, one customer that is 100% of your revenue. You know what type of risk you're under, and you can almost be blackmailed by them or extorted because if they know that, they'll go, well, what happens if we leave? So the issue here then is what I recommend is you have two suppliers for every major thing that you got to purchase. Uh, One is a primary, and second is a backup. Of that, let's say you have four suppliers. Again, I'm just giving you hypotheticals here, but this is the thinking on this. One of them or two of them, but two max are large corporations. And then the others are small businesses where your backup could be large corporations in the other. And so what you're going to get here is you're going to get the benefit of all this. in terms of looking at your suppliers. But the question you're asking yourself here, and it's a valid question, and I can tell you right now, if somebody that's done a number of business turnarounds, this question typically doesn't get asked by the company until somebody like me or somebody who's in that business comes in, and that is, all right, let's look at all the suppliers we have and how are those relationships working. Now, they're not going to say, what value added are we getting from our suppliers? Because that's mostly consultant speak. But what you will hear or what you see is an analysis of, is this really a good relationship for the business? And so you want to improve what's going on. And I said it at the beginning, and as people listen on the radio, you can't see this, but once you map the process out, and you've got input, throughput, output. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with inputs. And I'm going to see how well I can get my inputs producing what they ought to produce. Now, when we come back from break, we're now going to have a different perspective on it, and we're going to take a look at the assets that you've purchased and how well are they performing. All right, so you've been listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm the host for today's show. Today, we're talking about lowest cost producer. This is part of our webinar series. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, and well, of course, we're here at the network. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right, for those of you that were here last week when we did the finance show, you know that we typically have music, but I don't have music today simply because I didn't feel like trying to manage all the panels. It's really what went on there. So, okay, if anybody out there, you got any comments? Now, if you're picking this up later and you're looking at this, and I'm not live anymore, and you put the comments in LinkedIn or Facebook, I'll pick up on those. So I'll come back to them. But the other thing is, come to the website, and you've got the links right there. I put it in there. Come to the website and take a look at the handouts and to see what we got going on. Oh, I got to check sound. My mistake. Sorry. Who's that boy? Yeah, 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 yeah. In your face. I love it. Got one more commercial coming, and then we're going to go back to live. All right, there we go. All right, we're going back on air. Hey, welcome to see how the sausage is made around here. And we're back. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm the host for today's show. Well, we're in track two. Track two, what does that mean? Well, we put together 3 tracks, a series of shows called Winning in Difficult Times. It's part of our whole emphasis on how we help small business owners deal with a recession or a contraction, depending upon the word you want to use. Now, is the world globally in a recession? No, not everybody is. Some people are. Are we going to have a recession? Well, if you listen to our news show at 4:30 Eastern Time, New York time, daily, you'll find out because we talk about it for a half hour every day. What's the status of the global economy? And then we focus on a couple countries. But we built this series to say, look, if there's a recession coming, which we believe there is, how do you not only recession proof your business, but how do you actually win in this type of environment? And what we've known for years after 4 decades, 5 recessions, here's what we know. It is a math problem. It's pretty simple. F equals, and here's what the fraction is. F is financial performance, and it equals C, customers, over cost. or in this particular case, we'll call it revenue, R over C. And so the goal is on the numerator, the number on the top of the fraction, you want to increase, and the denominator, the number on the bottom of the fraction, you want to decrease. Pretty simple. All right. So today, what we're doing is we're working on the bottom of the equation. And what we've been talking about is how to reduce your cost or get value from what you're currently doing. So if you are listening and not on either LinkedIn or Facebook, LinkedIn is my name, William Eastman. You just find me and you'll find us being live. Or if you're a Facebook person, you go to IBGR Network, and that is our business page there. Now, or you just listen as an audio, and you go to ibgr.network, ibgr.network. When you get there, navigation bar at the top of the page, go to resources, mouse over, click show notes. No, mouse over resources, click show notes. And when you get to show notes, then what you want is you want to scroll down on that page on the right-hand side. You'll see archive and the categories. You want to open season 12 operations. And then be there. Now, where I am at, the one I am coming to you from is this pop. So this would be episodes 53 to 56. Becoming a lowest cost producer, which is the track we're in. And oh no, wrong one. Episodes or podcast 41 to 45. Performance of company assets. That's the one I'm going to open. So these shows. And the goal here is that if you are on social media, you have a chance to interact with the show, ask questions, disagree if you so want to, okay? All right, so what have we done up to right now? Well, we first talked about this whole methodology of what we call value mapping, which is nothing more than looking at your input, your throughput, your output. Then we followed that up with, let's take a look at the supplier relationships we have, who are inputs into our process. Are we getting out of them what we need to be getting out of them? And now, where we're going here is to say, now I'm going to look at the assets that I've purchased, and those assets are pretty much in the middle into the throughput. And am I getting out of that what I need to get out of it? Because if I drive and I'm getting more out of them, if I drive up their performance, guess what? I'm reducing my cost. All right. So if you go to podcast or episode 41, creating value through tangible assets, what are some of the tangible assets I have? Cash, accounts receivable, contracts, equipment, tools, furniture, real estate, inventory, prepaid insurance. Okay. Now, some of these I'm going to skip over because I would typically do this in a whole show, and I only have 15 minutes to do a bunch of these. Cash. What are your rules on spending cash? All right, I'll give you the rule to start with. There are two conditions to spend cash. Condition number one, it produces revenue. Condition number two, it's an asset, which means it appreciates in value. If in fact it doesn't do either, then don't buy it or don't buy it with cash. Got it? Account receivable. Where are you there? In other words, are you still operating as a business or are you operating as a bank? You got your accounts receivable under 30 days because anything over there is basically a loan. Contracts. On the contracts, the thing that you've got to get done here, and I know sometimes you got a lot of handshake deals out there, but trust me, you're going to need your contracts that are legal and binding, because one of the things you may have to do is factor your accounts receivable. And if you don't have a contract where that can be enforced legally in court, you're not going to be able to factor it. And a factor is nothing more than selling some of your accounts receivable to get paid for. Equipment and tools. Let's go there. The rule of thumb here is, are they being utilized 80% of the time? If they're not being utilized 80% of the time, then perhaps you have a candidate to be moved out. Got it? All right. Furniture. I don't know what it does for you. I guess if you got a lobby, it looks good. But other than that, real estate, good one. Do you own the property you're on? Because one of the ways you can increase the inherent value of your business is to own the property. All right. But that's a different decision. Talk to your financial advisor. Obviously, your inventory that you have is also part of that. And then any prepaid insurance. All right. So the next one, it just talks about how to calculate the tangible asset. right? And we talked about balance sheet, debt to asset ratio, and return on assets. These are the numbers you want to look at. The balance sheet, and all you know is the balance sheet or the balance statement, and all that is total liability plus owner's equity equals total assets. All right. All right. You could do it the other way and say assets minus liabilities equal equity, but in this case, you're looking at assets, so you want to take a look at that. Debt to asset ratio, total liabilities divided by total assets, and that would give you debt to asset ratio. Now, what this one tells you is how well those assets performing. Now, it's one of the ways of looking at it. So the first one, the balance sheet, gives you what are the total assets. Now, the next one says, okay, what is our ratio here that we need to look at? And if you're tracking this over time, what you want to do is you want to make this ratio better. All right. Because it also takes a look at how well your debts are working in your favor. And then return on assets, that's simply income divided by assets equals ROA. Those are all numbers to tell you whether or not you're utilizing your stuff. Now, again, I go back to what I said before. I know I come from, in this particular case, I come from a manufacturing perspective, but you look at something and you're not using it 80% of the time, seriously question why do you have it? Or if you owned it, did you buy it new? Did you buy it used? Are you leasing it, etc.? Because it's not performing. All right. Now, non tangible assets, trademarks and copyrights and patents. In other words, have you trademarked or copyrighted or you got a patent on your process? Are your products copyrighted? In other words, have you had the protection? Because this is worth a lot of money. Domain names, okay, pretty much you own that domain name till you sell it. So if you own any, one of the things you want to consider domain names before you get rid of them, sell them. All right. Employees could be considered and many times are part of value created if you got a great workforce. Hard to estimate, but you can take a look at that if you are performing above your competitors and all things are equal, and the employees might be the difference there. Brand and goodwill come together in terms of um, if your company, let me put it this way: if your company is worth more than its valuation, somebody comes in, values your company, and then sees what you can sell it on the market in the marketplace. The difference, a positive difference, is typically brand and goodwill. The best example I can give you is, and I'm going back almost 30 years ago, when Chrysler bought American Motors. American Motors was made in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Chrysler bought them out and then shut down the plants and stopped making American Motors cars, except Jeep. And when Lee Iacocca was asked, why do you spend $4 billion to shut down the plant? He said, that's easy. Four letters, JEEP. Because the brand and the goodwill that went with Jeep was worth, in his mind, what he spent. And as it turned out, it really was worth that. Okay. And then finally, what you want to do is you want to look at can you take a look at your assets and then use that as a comparison to how you're performing against other companies. Now, if you go to Dun& Bradstreet Hoover's is one source, Statista is another source, but there's data out there to say, okay, this is what these companies on tangible and intangible assets. Here's their valuation or what they're producing based upon those. Grab those numbers. Those numbers are priceless to you because it gives you a sense for how well you're using the resources. Suppliers is have you made good decisions on your suppliers, which we talked about in the previous one. This one here is you've made decisions on assets that you've acquired that you're going to use to make your company more profitable. Whether that is a cost reduction from a piece of equipment, or it's something that it's a new marketing partnership that you got that you're investing in because you can increase your revenue. Doesn't matter which one it is. All right, now when we come back from the break, let's take it to the next, and this is our last segment of the day, and what we're going to be talking about here are operating costs. So this is going to be the final piece of our segment on throughput. And of course, I could go on and on and on and on and on about this stuff because you can. But this stuff is really critical. And, one of the interesting things I find is finding people who actually enjoy operations. That's not a huge population. There's not a lot of people out there, and as a business owner, you really need people. You really need people who value the operations part of the business because, quite frankly, this is where the money's going to be made. And if we go back to the original premise behind this, you're working in an economic downturn. Um, you can hold. You're going to lose in an economic downturn. You're going to lose margin. Well, we can. There's. No, I mean, you're going to lose revenue. It's not much. Unless you're really lucky and you're selling absolutely the right thing, you're going to lose revenue. But that doesn't mean that you lose money because it's not how much money you take in; it's how much you keep. And so, if you have a reduction in revenue, but an increase in margin because you reduce your cost, then you're coming out much better than when you went in. Okay, with that, I got to go to break. So you listen to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm here to host the show. We are talking about becoming the lowest cost producer. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right, my friends out there. That one I had to wing because I didn't start the clock fast enough. Let's see what we got here. All right, we're into commercials. We're an international company now. I got commercials. I got commercials in Spanish. I got commercials in Portuguese, which is what's on right now. All right. So for everybody there, here's kind of our final piece of the day, and that is now what we're going to be looking at is operational cost. But what you're really getting here is a primer on what you have to do on the operations side. There's plenty more to this, but we're pretty soon going to kind of turn the corner and we're going to have a totally different conversation about how do you take this and use it to your advantage working with your customers, which is what we're talking about tomorrow. Now, I won't be here on social media on the video camera tomorrow. I will be there next week on the camera. So, anyway, I guess that kind of gets it. Let me see here. We're at about a minute, so we got about a minute left. So if you got any questions, pop them up, and I'll hit you back with them. Oh, okay. Let me see here. Yeah, I think the issue with suppliers is that you try to minimize them, but it's not like. Here's the question: how far should you go minimizing customers, suppliers? Excuse me. And my answer to that is my answer to that would have been before the COVID pandemic or the lockdowns would be get it to the bare minimum. Now, I would say to you is go to the bare minimum and then back off and say, what if? And so I would say to you, always have a primary and secondary. If you can't bundle it with everybody, one person, one company, then basically say I would have three suppliers. Let's just pick that number. I can't get it below three suppliers because I have to buy in three different places. Have a small company and a big company in each one of those, so you would have six suppliers. All right, let's check out one. There we go. And we're back for the last segment today. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman, and I am so happy to be here with you. And this is one of the shows that we're doing as I'll use old terminology, what we would call simulcast. Is that we are not only doing the audio, which those of you who are on the network are listening to, but we're also doing visual, and that we want LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube right now. So here's what you want to do. If you want to kind of switch over and you're a LinkedIn person, just go to my personal profile, William Eastman, on LinkedIn, and you can watch this. If to everybody else, you want to stay on audio, awesome. Need to go to the website though, because we got one more handout or one more set of show notes to discuss that we put together. So IBGR.network. IBGR stands for our call sign, IBGR International Business Growth Radio. IBGR.network is our name, our URL, and our broadcast frequency. All right. When you get to the website, to the home page, you'll see resources on the navigation bar all the way to the right. Mouse over. I want you to click show notes. After you click show notes, unfortunately, you got one more thing you got to do. Okay. Hold on a second. I had to cough button. Sorry to people on LinkedIn and Facebook. I had to cough. Okay. So now that when you get onto that page, scroll down. On the right hand side, you'll see archives, and then you'll see categories. Scroll on down to S12 or season 12 operations. Click that. We're operating is now we are at the top one, and that is episode 53 through 56. That's S12, season 12. Episodes are E, 53 through 56 podcast on operating cost. All right. So let's start there. Kind of click it, and that's how we're going to end our day. Is here as we were talking about this whole concept operation, basically run a better company. In the beginning stages of recession, you typically inflation and recessions go together. Now, not all recessions have inflation as a problem long term. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. But typically, inflation is part of an onset of a recession. And during stages of it, as a business owner, you typically have some flexibility about passing on that additional cost to the customer. All right. Until the customer can no longer afford it. That's called demand destruction. Now, does that last a week? Does it last a month? Does it last 6 months? I can't tell you because it's a whole bunch of other factors related to the economy. What I can say is that most people are in agreement that whatever cost increases you're incurring, your ability to pass that on is probably either gone or going to be going away very shortly. So then what happens when you've got to keep pricing it and the customer can't afford it? That's called demand destruction. Now, when you get there, your choice, okay, your choice is not to increase prices to deal with inflation, because how does inflation affect your business? Well, let's say last month you bought a load of X, and a load of X cost $1 a pound, and you bought 100 pounds. And now this month, uh, because of inflation, is that now it costs that same unit, and that same amount costs you $1.10 per unit. So it's gone from $1 to $1.10, 10% increase, inflation. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn around and try to sell it at the existing price? Well, I guess if you have to, but your first step is going to be what? Well, I'm going to increase the price on this because I'm not gouging anybody. I'm not keeping any more money than anybody else. All I'm doing is just paying for the additional costs. And of course, the consumer or the business owner, the people that are paying this, don't agree with you, but that's a different story. So here's the deal: at some point, you can't pass on price increases because of inflation, so you have to eat them. Well, if you've been doing the stuff we've been doing in this track over the last 7 weeks, if you've been doing that, then I can guarantee you that you have been going at this the right way. Now, what do I want to do here? All right. So as I'm looking at operating costs, I'm going to first of all I'm going to look external to the business, and I'm going to be looking at what's happening to cost in different areas. We talked about in the previous segments, last two segments, is about suppliers, because what's happening is that what are they doing? How are they responding to inflation? And has that changed who I should be buying from? Okay. Not saying to go with the cheapest again, because my experience is the cheapest is never the cheapest. We just simply don't incorporate everything into that goes with it. But I want to start looking at where's the shift going on in the key cost areas, and how do I deal with it? Do I find a better supplier? Do I negotiate a better deal? Or what? Or I'm stuck with it, and how am I going to fix it inside? All right. Analyze the value chain, which we talked about. How does that impact in my value chain? And then factor in cost economies. Perhaps what we do is we make more of one thing. So let me jump to something that is typically we discuss over on the customer side, when we talk about holding your best accounts, which is what we'll do tomorrow, is the issue here of in a recession, it's usually a smart move to reduce the number of products services that you sell, right? Because you're more than likely not going to be able to sell the same volume of it. So what do you do? Well, one of the things you look at is which ones are generating revenue and which ones aren't. Number one. Number two is in some of these, if you were to do more of it, there would be a cost economy. You would be buying more and therefore driving down the cost. So if you had 6 or 7 different product lines, maybe what you want to do is get it down to 2 or 3 of the hot ones, the ones that people really want. And it's not a matter of you don't you don't announce to the world that we're not doing the other ones. It's just a matter of we're not selling them. Okay. All right. So what is that all? What is all this doing on your cost structure of your business? How is it impacting the cost structure? Now, if you did the value mapping that we've talked about, and one of the things that we talked about in the finance on Mondays, we talked about this concept of activity-based costing. And activity-based costing if you is nothing more than accounting for money differently. It's a different set of books. Now, it's not. It's you're not doing anything illegal, but when you're doing your books for the government or for the banks for taxes, etc., you're doing that with specific objectives. And that objective is to meet legal requirements. This is a set of books that takes the same numbers and puts them together differently to say, what does something truly cost? How much revenue are we really making with this? In other words, you're now looking at where you really are in terms of, well, this is making me any money. So I want to be able to take a look at where those cost pools and those revenue pools are at. Because if in fact it's getting out of hand, and what I want to do is I want to find a way of moving over to some alternatives. Okay. And so I got to be on top of this. And if you have never heard of activity based costing, or if you had a college class that we called it managerial accounting, is read up on it a little bit. And if you don't want to learn it yourself, get somebody to do it. It's not that difficult. And if you valued map, if you did the stuff that we talked about today, and we've talked about over the last couple of weeks with your business, that is simple to do. If you've value mapped everything and you've tried to take out the cost and increase the quality, and now you have a picture of a process that's pretty tight, all you got to do now is fully burden each one of the steps with their true cost, their true variable cost, what it costs to make, and true fixed cost, what percentage of fixed costs do they contribute, and that will include labor costs and all that. And so now, what do you know? You know which products or services are profitable, which ones aren't. You also know which customers are profitable and which ones are not. And so you focus in on I'm going to build the most profitable products and services to my most profitable customers. And that is where I'm going to put my emphasis during this economic time. All right, so let me see here. I'm going to analyze the entire chain. We talked about that when we're looking at processes. I'm going to look at output. And yep, I think we got it. Now I'm going down to number 56, the last one here. I think that pretty much, I think we pretty much got there. So let me just talk a little bit about this. Go on down to scheduling, job efficiency, operational efficiency, waste. Let's get down to that. I already talked about differentiate which ones are products and services and how they're performing. I want to reduce my SKUs, my units that we're selling for over this period of time. Uh, but what I want to look at is where are the gains left? Okay. Well, the gains are left now on how we manage the process. That's really where you're going to get your operating costs. So the three that I want you to consider is scheduling, job efficiency, and waste. All right. Now, operational efficiency is going to be included in here. So, scheduling, the number one impact that you can have on the business is how well you schedule workflows. So, if how many customers, how many jobs can you get in an 8-hour day? The more you can get done in an 8-hour day, because you already got the labor there, then the more margin you're going to make on those. So the number one thing to do, in fact, this is really uh, senior management job, is the scheduling of work. You got to get the scheduling of work right. Then number two is job efficiency. All right. And you can put operational efficiency together. And what I mean by this is, okay, we've scheduled 8 jobs to be done today. Now, how well did we do those jobs and did we get them done in the amount of time that we had allocated? That's what that means. And so scheduling is number one. How well the jobs are done are number two. And then the last one is waste. And waste is the other way of saying quality. And that is how much rework, how much scrap, etc. If you can schedule tight, and you can schedule tight because you understand, you can forecast, you understand what the customer is going to demand of you. Your processes are really efficient, as we've talked about, and you have eliminated most of the waste. And by the way, scheduling is a management job. The efficiency is a supervisor job, whoever is supervising over the work, and waste is the employee job. All right, I greatly appreciate you listening. This is the IBGR Network. IBGR stands for International Business Growth Radio. My name is William Eastman. Thank you for thank you for attending today and the series and being in the webinar. And we'll be back tomorrow with how to hold your best accounts. Have a great business day. Whoa. We just got that one right. Okay. If I sound a little congested, I am because I think the plants around here think it's spring. All right, so everybody that's been on, I greatly appreciate you watching and listening. Any other comments put up there, I'll pick up on them. But I greatly appreciate you being here and helping us with our soft launch here because come the next season, 50% of the people on the air here at IBGR will be on visually as well as doing audio and text. Have yourself a great day, and don't miss today's news show. 4:30 Monday to Friday, 4:30 Eastern time. We talk about the latest business economic news. You take care.